Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link down there. If you want to actually join the conversation, you can click on that link and you'll be able to be part of the chat and the questions and everything else inside of Zoom. You can come and register and hang out with us. You're welcome. If this is the first time you're here, and you're looking around and you're figuring there's attendees here, there's panelists here, and you're trying to figure out what is what. Let me give you a little bit of tour. The panelists, it was a very complicated process, arduous process that we used to bring the panelists in and choose this group. They showed up early. So they have good audio, they have good video, they have good internet, and they have a need to add to our conversation. If you're sitting here watching this, there's going to be some point in time while you're watching it and you just think that we're off the rocker. We've lost our you know better. You know that there is something that we are talking about that you know more of. Well, then join the panel. We're at 30. We have room for another 29 people. Or 19 people. So come join us and be part of the conversation. We're looking for everybody who, if you come from this industry and you have things that you want to add to it, we're hoping this panel itself keeps on getting richer and richer and richer by the people who choose to come and share with us. So that's how you do it. We open the door at 6 o'clock in the morning. So 6 to 6:30. I'm not going to promise anything. It's a wide open conversation. It's what I tend to think of as the original hour. It's how this all started, of us just having kind of a roundtable conversation. So 6 to 6:30 is kind of that part, maybe to 6:40 or so. From 6:30 to 6:40, somewhere in there, we're going to release the Discord link. The Discord link is where about 600 of us or more hang out and talk more about all these things between all these events. By the time I've announced the Discord link, it's expired. So you have to come back tomorrow if you want to join Discord. 6:40 to 6:45, we open up for the mic checks. The mic checks are just to make sure that we have a quality show. And once we start those mic checks, we're not going to add anybody to the panel. So if you want to be in this panel, just make sure to get here before 6:40 and raise your Zoom hand, and we'll bring you in and test you and have you as part of the conversation. From 7 to 8, we have questions. So it's a general question time. You can ask anything around media production that you'd like. And it really is your job as an attendee to ask questions and vote on questions. If you don't have a question to ask, vote on the questions that you see there. There's 214 people here. There's not 214 questions and not 214 votes. So participants are not fully efficient yet. so the attendees, you're not being fully effective yet. When there's that many votes or that many questions, then we know that you're fully engaged. And so if you're watching this, your job as attendees is to keep the conversation going. And again, we answer questions at the beginning of the hour a little slower than we answer them at the end of the hour. So your votes really matter of how you order those questions. The ones we get to at the very end, we will generally get through all the questions in an hour, but by the end, it's like yes, no, black, white. There's not really any detail there. So we have more detail at the beginning, less detail at the end, and your votes are deciding what we spend time on. So definitely look at those questions and go from there. The chat is there for comments. When you ask questions, try to keep those questions to 5 lines or less, 1 question per post, and just questions, no chat. There's a chat for you to do all that stuff. So we have the second hour is every day we have a second hour now, and that second hour on Mondays is generally an all-purpose second hour. The second hour on Tuesdays is dedicated to audio. Wednesdays, cameras. Thursdays are special guests. Fridays are education. Saturdays are education. Sundays are just more question and answer. So that's how that kind of breaks up. Today we have Bob Caniglia, who is the head of sales operations for BlackMagic. He's going to be here in the pit with us to discuss, the 12K camera. And so Chris Summers will be leading the charge in the pit, and so he'll be grilling Bob, and so he'll be going through that, and then the rest of course open up those questions. So start thinking about what questions would you ask BlackMagic if you had it. Now we will be careful of not asking about future products or developments, but getting everything we want out of the 12K camera, or understanding it, is going to be the goal of the next hour. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, so without, I think we've gone through all the announcements that we need to. By the way, if you want to share this, what we're doing here, the bigger it gets, the more people like Bob we get to bring in, because I get to say that there's 300 or 400 or 500 or 600 or 1,000 people coming every morning, and that's up to you. So it gives us leverage to bring better and better guests in. We've got Renee Ritchie tomorrow. We've got great guests coming in over the next couple of weeks, and so my ability to do that is really directly connected to your ability to share it and grow this community. So there's the link that's there, and if you want to put it wherever you want to, that's great. All right, Chris, what do we got?
Good morning, Alex. I love all your various shades of gray you're wearing today. It's all gray.
I realized I used to wear this in front of my because it contrasted, and I put it on this morning, and I until you mentioned it, I realized, oh yeah, I just kind of blend into the background.
It's a floating head.
I will say that I tend to go 18% gray on a lot of things, and so when I go into an office,
neutral gray.
I've moved in.
I just see you at the Gap.
Office.
Do you have this in an 18% gray?
So I have a tendency to go into a new office, and the first thing I do is like lay down the paint cloths and just make it gray so that I can. Anyway.
All right. So TJ Escher says, can we cover what Alex did to reframe Hasmuk's scene in Zoom? That was amazing. I think we all agree that was really cool.
So it literally, I don't know why it didn't really sink in that you could do it with the Brio. But so what we had there is, and this was Guy's suggestion. So Guy, explain a little bit about how that process works and what cameras are available for this.
Yeah, so typically you would use this in a conference room with a PTZ camera, like a traditional motor-driven PTZ camera. I found out about it from Paul Richards over at PTZ Optics. We were in a Zoom meeting, and he talked about it, and I was just floored that you could do it. So I bought one and experimented. And then Cyprian, who was an earlier attendee, I don't know if he's on right now, but he had a Brio, and we decided to try it out, and it worked, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. So when Hasmuk had some framing issues and you're like, can you move that? And I'm like, well, you could move it. Go ahead and just, request camera control. So you have to, there's a Zoom meeting setting. It's called far end camera control. And I'm looking at webinar right now. And you just got to enable it. If you want, I can show you guys what it looks like. But it's just a little slider that you slide over, and that's it.
And so it's the Brio, it's the Huddle Cam. What other?
Any of the UVC class compliant devices. So it's not all PTZ cameras, because we have some high end like BirdDog P200s that look fantastic, by the way, that 1-inch chip, and there's some other high end cameras, but they don't have that UVC USB connection. So it has to have the USB connection with that UVC. Basically, it shows up as a webcam. That's what the UVC
so like but like even like a C920 would theoretically work with this.
I think it might have. It depends on if you're like in 720 mode. It might be able to zoom in and blow up the pixels a little. I'm not totally sure, because they call it ePTZ, electronic pan tilt zoom. Yeah. Wow.
I was like, I'm buying a whole bunch of Brios. Like as soon as I didn't realize, like I was thinking the Huddle Cam, and it's a little expensive, and I don't know if that's what I need. But as soon as I saw that with the Brio, because we've been like going, oh, should we just start moving to Brios? And now I'm like, oh, we have to just send everybody those, because doing that reframing, I mean, anybody who does remote participant planning deals with that on almost a daily basis, because people just aren't, conscious, or they have, them figuring that out is something that's different, and you can do it during the show. Go ahead, Hasmuk.
You can get rid of the nostrils as well.
Exactly. Getting the camera placed well is still up to the user, but moving it around once it's there, I think is where we're kind of going with it now. Next question.
I just wanted to see something. My hands are off the screen, and Tucker is now controlling a Logitech C922 on my computer.
Amazing. That's cool. Leland, were you going to say something?
Basically the same thing. I just wanted to see if people have access to my camera, which is a virtual element in Zoom. If you select my frame, can you take control of my camera now?
I'm requesting control, Leland.
There you go. See if it works. See if you can actually adjust it, because I'm in a virtual camera. I didn't think you could. So I wanted to see if you could or not. Okay.
You cannot.
All. Thank you.
So when my 922 was going through my Mimo software and Mimo was selected in Zoom, Tucker couldn't control it. He can change between my cameras. Stop doing that, Tucker. But but when it was the 922 directly, he could pan and tilt it.
And,
That's what I
theoretically,
was
with
trying
the
to
proper-
confirm, and that's what we.
Theoretically, with the proper virtual camera driver, one could do that if one overscanned the canvas.
Yeah, Alex, I wanted to mention one more thing on the rooms. If you have a Zoom room, you can actually set it to auto answer. So basically at the far end,
Creepy.
it will. So like right now, I could invite over my conference room at the office, and then I could take control. So you could literally ship somebody a computer. They could open it up, and with the camera placed and connected, you can just take over whenever you turn it on and take over whenever you want. I thought that was really cool.
Yes.
Look
All
at the gears.
And I guess
Can
they
you
have
see
the new
gears
and they
spinning?
well, and they have the new touch screen that Zoom has for people talking and and I think that's really interesting. The camera is really small and it's attached to the thing, so I'm kind of like, well, I mean, it's fine, but it's not going to having as someone who's done this for a long time, having the touch screen away from where the camera is super useful, so because it's either a good frame or good ergonomics, but you can't have both at the same time when both of them are connected.
I didn't
Jason?
see an interface. Oh, sorry, Jason, go ahead.
The cynic in me immediately thinks, Skype ruined hardware that is built by software companies for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Colin?
I was just thinking out loud, is there a USB port where one could attach a remote or somewhat distant camera on that Zoom hardware? Where's John when we need him? He's not here today.
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, I think that oh, you mean for the all-in-one? Yeah, that would be something that'd be interesting. Yeah, it's
or
up there.
for that matter, some other useful port like an HDMI in.
No, I don't think it'll do that. But I think
that's
now you're going crazy. Grant and then Greg and then Victor.
Yeah, the Zoom Rooms is just some software that you can put on anything, and one of the things that you can enable is the touch interface. And so once if you have hardware that has touch, then you can enable that touch, because what I've seen as the hardware is actually a third party that is just using that interface into an all-in-one. I don't think that Zoom is actually doing the hardware itself.
Right. Yeah, so there could be some.
Are you sure that it's
interesting
actually
places
running Zoom Rooms and not some custom software build?
Looks exactly like Zoom Rooms. Like that.
I do think that Zoom is pretty aggressive about wanting to empower third parties to take advantage of their right now. That's their real. They're moving really fast in that direction. Is empowering third parties to customize the experience. Greg and then Victor and then Guy. Try to keep it to like 15 seconds.
Just one quick note on the Zoom thing. You do have to have an admin account to be able to use the far end control. So if you're on any kind of enterprise account or educational account like I am, for instance, my IT department has locked me out of that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, or the admin has to open it up. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Victor?
Yeah, question for Grant. It'll be the perfect segue. I just wanted to see if the HuddleCam HC3 will take the remote commands that we've been talking about here.
Or is that for Guy or? Yeah,
that was for Guy. Definitely.
Oh, give it. I'll just click on your head. Hold on.
No. I don't have it. I'm asking if that camera, if we buy it from you, if that is one of the ones that will be able to do it.
If it's the EPTZ, the HD one, that one definitely will.
And how much?
And
what's the price on that again?
$299, but of course they're out of stock. There's a one from Lumens that is EPTZ that I believe is in stock, but it's like $100 more. So if you want one right away, or if you could find a Brio, I mean, any of those three.
Right.
So the BKG2, the one that's $100 more, $399, that one would do it or not?
I believe that's the model. I don't know off the top of my head what the model number is on that one. I'm new to the Lumens line, but I saw that Oliver had them.
This is the Huddle. This is the Huddle.
Mm-hmm.
The Huddle Cam, the one that
that's $399.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure
Excellent.
We could talk about it offline.
Next question.
All right, let's move on. Colin Sandy says, and we've discussed this a little bit in the past, to lock everyone into a higher resolution in Zoom, is having someone join with the Zoom room connector feature the only way to do that? I always join my Zoom church chat with a life-size codec and just assumed folks were always HD. I don't know what the life-size codec is.
And Lifesize is another like a conferencing platform.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's. I think the Zoom room is the only thing that we know of that guarantees it. We do see that Zoom used to be 720 all the time, and as their capacity keeps on growing, we're seeing it come back to a lot of things. But the only thing that seems to guarantee it is a Zoom room joining, and it's mostly, I'm sure, to serve the room. To make sure if someone paid for the room, they get to see 720, and so it just up-reses it. It does not up-res it for the attendees, so it's a little bit of a bummer there.
We're working on that. I'm pushing really, really hard, and once I get it working for me, I'll try to get it working for all of us. So yeah, I'm pushing really, really hard.
Well, an interesting thing is that it does open it up for YouTube is 720 because of your Zoom room. We're seeing that high quality going to YouTube, and as we roll out. I think there were a couple comments about why would we do a Q&A system that isn't just using the Q&A system inside of Zoom. And one of the reasons for that is that means you could theoretically watch it on YouTube and still be part of our chat and part of our Q&A, or watch it on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube all at the same time and still be part of the same Q&A. So, being able to bring all of that together is, we think, might be useful. Tucker and then Colin.
With Zoom trying to take market share from people like traditional codec manufacturers like Cisco and Polycom, Camberg before Cisco, what I've seen just in a little bit of reading is that they're working really hard to enable codecs like those different codecs when they connect to get the same kind of experience they would have gotten with Cisco or with the traditional systems. Right. So they have prioritized HD for those, considering that they're going to be in important rooms.
Yep.
I was just now looking at the platform support for Zoom rooms, and I was disappointed to not find Linux. However, there is Android support, so you could conceivably take a large touchscreen, attach it to your Raspberry Pi, run Android on your Raspberry Pi, and run Zoom rooms on that. Fun for someone to build a tiny little piece of hardware.
My 12-year-old son is just tore apart he had a little build your own computer thing with a Raspberry Pi. He tore it apart. Now he's getting deep into Raspberry Pi. So
there's all sorts of fun stuff you can do with those.
Yeah, so I think he might be our guinea pig. All right, next question.
TJ says, can Grant share any insights or horror stories from his latest gig?
Don't want to put you on the spot, Grant, so just say what you can and can't say, if anything.
Oh, I mean, there's lots to say, but I think I was just talking to Blue, so I think we're gonna do a second hour or something at some point on it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
okay. Well, let's table that one and have the two of you do the whole second hour, and then we'll just dedicate it, and everyone knows it's.
Let me just tell you.
At least tell us what the job was.
I can just tell you. Well, I can tell you that there was 22,000 people in Zoom. We had 75 meetings. I had 32 computers in the studio, and then 45 machines that were ran on AWS under Jeff's control. So we had Zoom meetings hosted in the cloud, and then a studio with a 360-degree screen and all sorts of 1,500 people on the screen, individual faces, and it was insane. And surprisingly, it went really well. There was so many things that that could have gone wrong, but actually it was just scale. It was actually very simple, straightforward processes, just multiplied many times. So we'll talk about it more, but it was really fun.
I may have a couple more events for you, so we'll talk more. All right. Next question.
A. Mitchells says, Tucker, please explain Parsec more for the group. Thanks.
Tucker.
1 parsec is the distance to an object whose parallax angle is. No, I'm kidding. So Parsec is the Parsec gaming is it's really interesting to see what the gaming community has done with things like streaming and all these different things, because they don't have the pressure of live events on them. They have their little cube and they just work really hard on it. And so they do groundbreaking things. And this is one of them for sure. Parsec Gaming is a screen share application and it requires internet connection, but the main things is guaranteed 60 frames per second. I say guaranteed, it feels very much like 60 frames per second. It can definitely eat all of the bandwidth that you can hand it. And then it does some interesting pass-through stuff as far as giving you direct control. It also gives you statistics back on what your actual round trip latency is. And that's it. I mean, it's Parsec Gaming. Check it out. There's a free version that you can do with just a single monitor connection. It does not do multi-monitor all that well. You can do a paid kind of business version that does give you access to multiple monitors. I actually haven't done it yet to see if it's multiple at once. I think it's the ability to switch between monitors, but it's fantastic. Check it out.
And one question is will it work over the LAN or just WAN? Does it have a server in between?
It needs WAN access for authentication, but it will work just over LAN, and it is PC only. You can control a PC from a Mac, but you cannot control a Mac from a PC or a Mac from a Mac. The hosts have to be PCs.
Got it. And Jason and then Chris?
Also equal to 3.3 light years. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
In the Star Wars universe.
I was going to say, I'm just curious, show of hands, how many people on the panel used to participate in LAN parties?
Not hardcore, but guilty, sure.
Extremely hardcore.
Just curious. Just curious.
And one more other question. Do you have access to cameras or is it just screen capture for Parsec?
It's access to cameras. It's the desktop is what you get.
Right. So whatever you put on it. So
yeah.
if you put a full screen, whatever, it would do it.
Yep.
Okay. Very good. All right. Next question.
All right. This is a health question. To anyone who spends most of their workday in a dark room in front of screens, how do you stay sane and healthy? That's who says?
I will say that I don't know how sane I am or even how healthy I am, but I take a lot of walks. I mean, I just like I get up a lot. Drinking a lot of water helps that because it creates an internal clock that creates the need to get up a lot. So I drink a lot of water, and then as a result, or drink a lot of liquids, whether it's coffee or tea or water. And then I take a lot of walks. I walk outside probably almost every hour just to get a little bit of sun. And I try to break it up a lot, and it just helps me think. It just helps me like straighten up my head a little bit, and then go out. I mean, this is a popular topic here, so we'll try to. I'm gonna call on a lot of people, but try to keep it really short. Bill, and then Jeff, and then Jason, and then Jeffrey. We'll start with that.
This isn't an ad because I think the other watches do it, but since I got an Apple Watch 3 or 4 years ago, that little every 1 hour it tells you to get up and move around has been transformative for me, and I try every second or third one to make it a hike somewhere or something else.
Yeah, Jason.
As someone who is exceptionally ADD, I can say just give into your fidgets, and yeah, I get out. I always get up. That's just how it is.
I have a pool in the back, and I will admit that on a lot of phone calls, if I don't think I'm going to participate that much, I do clean the pool while I'm on the call because it gets me outside and doesn't make a lot of noise. Jeff.
Our family loves to play board games. Get your faces away from screens. And interestingly enough, our favorite board game for over a year has been the board game Pandemic.
Jeffrey.
Get a cat. But seriously, actually get a cat. That's a good idea. But you could also move things around from your dark area. So like, let's say you have your office and you have all your books behind you. Take those books and put them into another room. So you have to walk over to get a book to reference something, come back. So put things in different areas, and then check on things. If you got a plant or something like that, go check on it, and check the weather, go outside and come back in.
Chris and then Mickey.
I can't speak on the ocular thing, but I'm putting together a webinar for ergonomics in the home workspace and doing research right now about micro breaks and standing up every 10 minutes. Your body will grow into a position as quickly as 7 minutes in that position. And no matter how good your desk is set up ergonomically, if you're sitting, your hip flexors grow short. So you have to stretch those out or just open them up. And that's a tiny thing. That's just like a stand up every 10 minutes kind of a thing. The suggestions already given are great though, as far as like moving around, changing brain waves with repetitive motion can actually help you think through problems that you couldn't do otherwise. So even from productivity point of view, getting up and moving around will actually help. Exactly, Chris Fenwick. Exactly. You just open up your hip flexors. Sorry, go ahead.
I will admit that I plank a lot.
Yeah.
Like because it just pushes. It's a really fast.
Or a
way to-
reverse plank. Lay on the floor and put your feet up. Like lay on your back on the floor and put your feet up on your chair.
That's a lot harder.
I just have
squeeze
this little
up.
space. I just have a little space that I can plank, and it just pushes all my blood back up. You know, my blood gets it racing quickly. Go ahead, Mickey. No, okay, Chris, and then Grant, and then George. Quick, try to keep it quick because we have a lot of questions building up here. Go ahead, Chris Summers, and then.
I was just going to say diet is a big thing, and especially like with most things, sitting in front of a monitor or doing long hours, it's too easy to call for takeout or get a pizza or something. But diet for me has been one of the biggest things to regain energy in that sort of long hours when you're in a dark room or in a not so great environment.
80% of my diet is one single ingredients, which means that I cook everything, and if there's more than one ingredient on the package, like rice or like eggs or whatever, I don't buy it. so I, you know, and that keeps me from cooking from that means that I'm more connected to, there's just not a lot of junk in it. Grant and then George really quickly.
I discovered, I've been looking for a standing desk, and then I discovered that the desk that I've got here had adjustable legs on it. And so I pushed it up to the max, and it's right at standing desk. In the panel, who has a standing desk?
I have one at the office, but I don't work at the office anymore.
Yeah, I'm liking it. I just haven't got this whole setup yet in that arrangement.
George.
Water, quick walks to the outside, and also I have ULight in pretty much all of the house now, so I will change the lights in my office space to daylight whenever I can. All
right, next question. We're going to keep moving. Now we're going to start speeding up because we've got more questions.
Here we go. 10 questions, 30 minutes. Here we go. Tim McKean says, we're putting together kits for professionals to check out for capturing video at home. For professors, sorry. We're thinking GoPro and Lav for durability and ease of use. What camera and mic would you put in such a kit? This is
iPhone.
for professors.
iPhone. I would have an iPhone. I wouldn't use an external camera. The reason is that the iPhone, you're going to be able to. I mean, you can get an Android if you want, if they don't have it, but the camera on the iPhone is better for that kind of thing than the GoPro, in my opinion. It's really wide angle, it's whatever, and the phone means that you have it, you can email it, you can post it, you can do all those other things. When you start getting into external cameras and like GoPros and everything else, now you got little memory cards, now you're digitizing things, and again, I do that all the time. But if I was going to hand something to somebody, I would rather hand them an iPhone than or a Samsung or whatever. But an iPhone probably is the easiest one. iMovie on the iPhone is pretty cool, you know, and so I think that I would, again, I use lots of cameras, but if I've been really thinking hard about education, and I just think that the iPhone is the best platform to generate the video content, you know, for someone who is non-technical. Jason and then Jeffrey.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, any smartphone, because even, you know, the modern Android phones are going to do a great job. In my humble opinion, GoPros are deliberately fragile, deliberately complicated, and deliberately not for professors.
I just think that you're going to end up with so much support with GoPros that it's just going to be, I mean, I have literally 20 of them. So it's not like I don't like them, but I wouldn't give them to non-technical people to run them. There's a ton of little weird things in there that you can really screw up quickly. Jeffrey?
So if you're going to do iPhones, I'm assuming you're going to do the FaceTime camera so they can see themselves and they can see the other people. So then the question is, what is the least amount for saving on money? What is the least amount of iPhone that you want to send to somebody like that?
I mean,
6S would be fine.
Sorry, say that again.
In my opinion, I'd say 6S would be just fine. I would even go so far as to say the most current iPod Touch would work. It
would, absolutely. I mean, I would, you know, I do think that, you know, yeah, and a lot of them will. The funny thing is, a lot of the professors will have that phone. So like they're not. You don't probably have to buy everybody a new phone for them to access that. You probably half your faculty will have a phone that's capable of doing what you're talking about there. Now go ahead, Chris Comfort, and then Chris Fenwick, and then Courtney.
Are you suggesting anything like the microphone or hardwiring the internet still, or are you just playing with like the?
Well, I think that they're just recording it.
Oh,
and I would then definitely think about like the Rode Go, wireless with a Samsung headset, or you can use it as a lav. I mean, all those things would be relatively strong, contenders for connecting better audio. There's a bunch of different ways to wire audio into it if you want to. But as someone who watches a fair bit of TikTok, a lot of people do a lot with just their phone. The noise cancellation within the iPhone is pretty robust. I mean, the big thing is that when you're dealing with a camera company, you're talking about a company that's 1/100th the size of Apple. Apple's budget on the camera is generally bigger than the entire R&D budget for almost every camera company out there. So you just have to understand that that's what they're up against, and that's why Olympus is getting out of the business. So it's because you can't compete with that. Computational photography is going to keep on growing. Chris Fenwick, and then Courtney.
Quick question about the iPhone: would you just set up phones that don't have a cellular service? If so, how would you set them all up on one Apple ID? How would you manage that portion?
I don't know. I mean, that'll probably be a longer question given the number of questions we have stacking up right now. But we should talk about that maybe in the education hour, because it's really the administration of that is, as you said, a whole different problem. But I will say that right now, I will keep on coming back to it, that the Apple ecosystem, when it comes to Keynote, Pages, iMovie on the phone, all of those things is so far superior to all the other options that education platforms need to really think about that really hard, as far as absolutely everybody just being able to create content. Courtney, and then Colin, but try to keep it real quick.
Since he's talking about recording lectures and not streaming, what do you do about non-removable media and the fact that you're probably going to fill up the memory in that if you especially use a cheaper iPhone?
I'd say post and delete. Post it where it needs to go and then delete it. But I mean, just using it you won't fill it up that fast because and again, I'm a strong proponent of not doing lectures ever. They were never a good idea. And so we now have the tools to avoid that. So take your 45-minute lecture, get it down to a 15-minute voiceover over Keynote, and put all that stuff together and, make it more condensed. And you're going to be better off. So I don't think you need all that video to do it. I think video lectures they're bad on video. They were bad when I was a kid. I mean, they're just all bad. Colin?
I hate to throw a bomb into this, but if the objective is to be able to let them see what they're recording, when you want to give them an iPad, and they also avoid the overhead of having a phone where you're not providing phone service anyway.
Yeah, iPad could work. The camera on the phone is better.
But make sure that you have a very slick mount for whatever you're doing, and make sure you ship them a tripod and a snazzy mount.
The hard part with the iPad is really overhead shots. So if you want to show something experientially, like I'm going to show you how to do something, or I'm going to show you a close up or whatever, mounting the iPad, to your point, becomes really more difficult. Whereas a phone is just really, the mounts for the phone or in the phone itself is lighter. That means that the armature is lighter. Everything else is lighter to get close-ups. It's easier to just grab something and look down. There still is a lot of training. I do take your point, Colin. I think that there are some logistical things that even as Jason said, an iPod would probably be enough to do a lot of this stuff. Just that the iPhone camera is so good. So anyway, next question.
Martin Reutman said, is it possible for any of you to give a tutorial on AudioHijack for Mac OS? Thanks to this group, I purchased it.
We needed to do a whole thing about that because there are some weird little gotchas in there that we do it, but I'm not going to do it right now.
Rogue Amoeba does a really good job, so just go look at the site and read the book.
They want videos. They want us to talk about it. We'll find a Rogue Amoeba, but maybe on a Saturday we'll add another hour and just have a Rogue Amoeba hour where we just kind of talk about how we use it, because I use it in one way and Chris Fenwick uses it another way and Jason uses it another way. Tucker, you're going to say something real quick?
Yeah, I was just going to say, definitely feel free to hit me up on Discord. I wanted to come in and do a Rogue Amoeba time. It's really difficult for me to commit to a time right now just because work. But yeah, hit me up on Discord.
Work getting in the way of office hours. Oh,
yeah, it's tough.
All right, next question.
Tim McAlpine says, outgrown the ATEM TV Studio HD. Studio environment with 5 Micro Studio 4K cameras and rely on camera control and tally. There only seems to be a couple of logical upgrades. TV Studio Pro 4K, not keen on the form factor, and only 8 inputs. Or all the way to the Constellation.
Well, what I'd say is I'm not a big fan of the all-in-one panel, mostly because it creates a lot of wiring. You know, like you have a whole bunch of wiring that comes out. All your I/O is going in and out of the back of the panel, which I think is a little unfortunate. I think that generally the kits that we've built are rack mounted, and so that we just have one Ethernet cable that goes out to them. I am using not here, but I'm at the office. I'm using a Constellation, and the only thing I'll say is that once you start using it, it's really hard to give up. Like I'm speccing everything with it now, trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for it because it's so much more of a switcher than what the older ones are. The problem you get into with the problem is I believe we're kind of in we're in an in-between state in BlackMagic hardware that the newer stuff all has Teranex, you know, it's able to standard convert everything coming into the switcher. And some of the older ones are really powerful, but they can't do that. So the big thing you have to decide is whether you want a super source, you know, for some of the stuff. Once you want a super source, so that's being able to put 4 images up, then you start looking at, you know, larger ones. I do think that I wouldn't, having the standards conversions makes a big difference. So definitely look at that pretty hard. And you may even still want that panel because of that. And again, the Constellation is really expensive for BlackMagic switchers. It's very inexpensive for the standard switching world. So, but those are things to kind of consider. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, for one, I have the 4K TV Studio Pro. I absolutely adore it. And the panel isn't a big deal because I just wire it into a rack mount and then all my IO just goes through the rack mount. So yeah, it was a pain once.
So you have like a drawer that comes out for that?
Yeah, it's a rack. I put it up, it's elevated, and below it are all its IOs. It's still facing backwards, but it's easy.
And it does fit into a rack, which is nice. It's less than 19 inch. So we've done that before with the panels. The 1ME panels will slide in and out of your rack. So you can deal with the IO that way. And it is a really great switcher other than that. Other than that, we tend to want to put it on a table somewhere and not be sitting there on a day-to-day basis, but it definitely can be used. Go ahead, Tucker.
You can also buy 3 for the price of a Constellation. That's worth mentioning.
You do have a point there. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, the one thing to consider when you do start stepping up into the bigger BlackMagic stuff, a lot of people look at them and say, "Oh, I do want that 4 HDMI, 4 SDI thing." I would recommend going on to the next step and going all SDI and then converting things you need to bring in, because the ability to logically lay out your inputs to where it makes sense for the show versus saying that 1 through 4 has to be HDMI, and you may wind up with your ordering gets really strange in that case. So once you go to the bigger step, go all SDI, get standards converters, either the BlackMagics or the Decimators, but that's my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Chris Fenwick.
Real quickly, I was going to say on the 4ME, the Constellation, can you have multiple 1ME control panels controlling different MEs in the thing?
Yep. Well, they're all controlling. All of them are controlling the whole thing, so you have to be careful of how you set that up. But you could have 4 or 5. I think that there's only 8 connections.
How?
I think that there's only a maximum of 8 connections to the. I'm not 100% sure of that. We have someone coming soon that will know. But I believe it's only 8 total connections, either 6 or 8 total connections to the switcher that it'll support. So that's multiple software connections, your hardware connections, but you can absolutely have it. Talking to more than one panel. Now, if you're talking to, again, I'm not entirely certain. There may be, if you have a bunch of mini HyperDecks or HyperDecks, and then you also have these, and then you also have software, I think you start getting to a number of connections. And what I will say is that it is super dangerous. So just, like to have, to share a switcher. So, but we've done, we've had two ME. We haven't done it with four MEs, but we've done it with two MEs where we're switching two whole rooms with one switcher, and each ME just has its own room. You give up some, obviously we stack MEs a lot. So you give up some, and we were designing one around a 4ME where we had 4 rooms being run by 4MEs. We didn't end up executing it because of COVID, but we were building it against 4MEs and just running 4 individual rooms, simple cuts, that type of thing. But it was definitely doable. We routinely run in a room, have two panels running. One is managing iMag and the other one is managing the show. And so that's a really common thing to do. So next question.
Next question has some weird comments. So Stuart Fairweather, hey Stuart, says with the 920 out of stock worldwide, are the 930s and 960s considered acceptable? And then somebody else posted a link saying that there are some in stock.
There's definitely 920s that look like they're taking a little while to ship, but they're floating around Amazon. There's a ton of them. I'm kind of curious as to whether
in 10 days.
A lot of them are. I'm curious about how many are getting bought and then resold on eBay, because eBay has a very large supply of 920s that just take a little longer to get to you, like 4 days and 5 days instead of 2. So we're starting to stock up on the 920s from eBay, and they're coming in boxes and with people with a lot of positive ratings, and so it's not so I think that one of the supply chain issues is that I think a lot of people are. It's a good time to mark them up, and I think that a lot of them are getting bought out of stock and then republished in eBay.
Do you think you're responsible for the shortage?
I don't think I think the problem is it's a pretty well-known, issue that that Logitech cornered the market on. I don't know what it is. Everyone's known for a long time, like a decade, that there was no other webcam that really had great sensors. That was just kind of and we tested everything in 2011 or 2012 when we were doing, 5 to 8 events a week for Google, doing all these Hangouts. We literally had the budget and we just bought every webcam that existed, all at one time. And then we put them up against charts and then looked at frame rate and everything else. And nothing was close to Logitech. The only one that we bought because we liked the field of view and the depth of field was the Precision HDs from Cisco, which were a lot more expensive. So we bought like 20 of those for certain events. And then everything else was we had probably 100 C920s. And we just couldn't find anything else that looked as good as a webcam. So, yeah. Next question.
This is probably for Leland. And Leland, I'm going to tell you, I don't understand most of what I'm about to read. So Guy Blanky says, low budget sports event, wide area, roaming cameras with cell phones, 4G to vMix, WebRTC, which one? vMix call, ? Selecting caller in browser to NDI as premix and or SRT directly or through...
Oh, brevity is the soul of wit. Oh boy!
When we said 5 lines, Guy took it and he just that's the densest question ever.
Maxed it out.
You win, Guy, as the densest question that we've ever seen on this forum. There you go, Leland. Can you make any sense of that question?
I see what he's asking. He's just asking for the best way to approach this low budget sporting event as far as remote camera switching goes. I think your best bet is actually the phones using WebRTC. If you've got a good phone, the WebRTC connection is going to maintain based on the signal you have. So keep that in mind. If you're going to be using NDI or SRT, for one, you're going to deal with audio issues with NDI right now. The other is SRT is more for low bandwidth areas. So if you're dealing with a low bandwidth situation, fine, but you're going to delay your production by about 100 milliseconds if you do that. So keep that in mind. You're going to slow down your signal because it wants to be able to keep that signal relatively steady and solid in a low bandwidth environment. So it's going to slow everything down a little bit. You don't really want to do that for a sporting event. I would say go WebRTC all the way.
And by WebRTC, you mean vMix call?
Using vMix call would be your best approach.
We're surprised. We're doing all these vMix call tests right now, and we're surprised at the latency that we're seeing about. It's the same as Skype. It's just that we expect it to be a little bit faster. We're seeing about 350 milliseconds per leg. you know, it seems a little slow. SRT is going to be a lot slower than that. It's going to be
it's going to be another 100
second,
or 2 milliseconds slower than that.
Hundreds of milliseconds, like 200 or 300 more
yes.
milliseconds. Yeah,
that's true.
Greg,
what about something like Switcher Studio?
Oh, you know, with the iPad.
Yeah,
4 inputs.
If you're using all phones,
I think you only get 4 inputs on Switcher Studio.
No.
Yeah,
maybe you're right. You're right.
It's and it.
Cute.
I don't know if I'd try to put it into something that was. I guess my experience at Switcher Studio only testing it was I don't think I'd put it into anything mission critical. You know, like if it's not mission critical and you're experimenting, I think it's cute. But it is you know, it's a little. I felt like it was a little unstable. You know,
it's so software and Wi-Fi that it's scary. It's like it's shaky.
Well, that is
it is a low budget thing. I mean, let's not drive the tank to the grocery store, Alex. It's a
Tucker.
Okay, Alex only owns tanks. Get with a program.
You've done a ton of shows, Greg, with the Switcher Studio.
I've done a lot of shows with Switcher Studio. I've done a lot of shows with Sling.
Okay. And they worked well.
Well, I mean, you know, again, you know, does it work? You know, or is it brilliant? Is it brilliant? Absolutely not. Does it work? Yes, it can work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, it's the price, you know, price point and what are your expectations? So
you know, and the hard part for me is that my wife and I are a good example. As an example, is that my wife can tell you the cheapest gas in any town that we've lived in. She can tell you where the cheapest gas is to buy it, and I can tell you every gas station with a right turn in and a right turn out. You know, so like she asked how much that cost. I'm like, I don't know. All I know is I'm not going to take a left turn to get gas. And so that I am a very stingy about time. You know, so when I will say when I give recommendations, a lot of what I'm looking at, the prism that I look at is that time is everything to me, and money is something that I can come up with, you know? And so, and so when I look at all these little things that are wonky and stuff like that, if I look like it's going to take me a lot of time to figure it out, I'm or that's going to constantly breaking or constantly like doing whatever, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a lot of work. Tucker and then Beju.
Yeah, I would actually push back the other way on SRT and say that if we're talking about to the cloud, latency kind of goes out as far as being one of the main concerns for me, at least. So I would actually lean toward SRT using Larix. One, the Larix camera function is really, really good, including some base stabilization and things. My son's saying hi. And then with SRT, you can tune based on latency or quality and things. You can kind of get around, and you can definitely get 100, 200 milliseconds for each camera coming in, and you're not limited to 8 calls. You can go ahead and expand beyond if you need to. But yeah,
that's a good point you make, Tucker, because I was going to ask about the ability to fluctuate the bandwidths on that. And the only reason I mentioned WebRTC was because of the fact that the user would be able to receive the return signal that you choose for your, staff if they're out there on the field. The other would be that you could control the bandwidth in the return and the receiving feed. So I'm not that familiar with SRT. So if Tucker's approach is a more reliable standard, then I would say, yeah, look into SRT and see what your options are.
All right, next question. We're going to go into speed round. We've got 11 questions in 11 minutes. So when I come to you 15 seconds to answer, we'll do it quick.
I'm going to go real quickly back a little bit. The C920, Stuart was asking, or whoever asked the question, about the 930 and 960. Do you know anything about those cameras?
930 is got the quality of the 920, except that the lens is much wider. And so it's good for a conference room, less good for a person. But if you want to see the background or see the environment, the 930 is going to be better. The 930E is going to give you a better view. But it looks a little weird when you get close enough to get this frame. People are stretched out a bit because it's a much wider angle lens, probably 50% wider than the 920.
And the 960?
And the 960, I don't even know what it is.
Great. Okay. Sorry to sidetrack there. Chad Bystrom says, I'm colorblind in red and green. With the newer cameras and with LED lights being bicolor, are there newer tools to use for color balancing cameras to make sure it looks correct on screen?
Scopes. Scopes are your friend. Yeah. So you're going to need,
Scopes.
you match them with scopes. If you're colorblind and you can't look at those things, and you should be using scopes no matter what. So and I know that we owe you an hour on scopes, but when we're matching cameras, it's all scopes to us. It's not, we don't do anything with our eyes. I mean, like I don't match cameras with my eyes. Or a color correct monitor or anything else. I mean, we do final checks with that to make sure that our scope reading was done well, but we're looking at generally RGB parade as we do those color corrections. And then you can use a vector scope if you're using a Demon chart, but scopes are your friend. Bill and then Chris, really quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. You can, the vector scope is the tool for reading skin tones. And if you get skin tones right, everything else should be right. And there are vector scopes built into almost all the NLEs, plus you can get separate tools that have vector scopes.
To get the full range, there's some specific charts that will actually use the vector scope and show you exactly if you're trying to get accurate. But a lot of times we're doing art, on our BlackMagic cameras, we're pushing them to a warmer look. That means that all those charts don't matter. But what we can do is then compare them to each other on a same frame and get them all the same. Go ahead, Chris.
Just to add on to the answer, nothing wrong with a good old school color temperature meter like a Sekonic.
Right, but to get the cameras to look, to get overall colors the same.
Sure.
But to get the cameras to look the same, I think you need math.
Oh, you need scopes for that, but just on set with lighting, with being colorblind, if you wanted to go and like check a light or match lights with each other, just having that meter is helpful.
Yep. Absolutely. Next question.
Frederick Van Johnson and I are going to do an episode of his show about colorizing for various races. There's that interesting thing with a recent Annie Leibovitz photo shoot that was bad. Anyway, Phil Reed says, working with non-tech folks, is there a PC alternative to the Griffin iMic? Wanting to use a headset type mic with Jason. With a 3.5 millimeter input that I already have. Interviews will be on Zoom. Arms reach?
I forgot all about the Griffin iMic.
So yeah, I forgot about that. But as a super inexpensive, plug it in. This is the Pile $11 mic that we're using with a USB interface. I put it in Discord earlier, and it worked. Yeah, don't use that. That's really old. And anyway, but I would, then there's the Samson, then the DPA, which is what I'm using. Go ahead, Tucker. 15 seconds, then we're gonna move on.
One thing to pay really close attention to is just because it has a 3.5 mil adapter doesn't mean that it is ready to plug into whatever your device is. So pay attention to that.
Okay, next question.
Joe O'Brien says, thinking of moving from Skype, NDI, and OBS to vMix, and vMix call for the streaming broadcast with 5 to 7 remote performers on screen at the same time. Primary objective is to boost in audio quality and consistency. Anyone know if I can actually expect a bump in quality consistency from the Skype, NDI, OBS combo to vMix call?
You will not. I want to answer this one really question. We'll just move on. But we're doing extensive testing. You are not going to bump the quality up by moving away from Skype. You will bump the quality up by moving to physical outputs instead of NDI. So we know that the NDI doesn't look or sound as good or as consistent as just using the HDMI out, so the computer. But the Skype is the highest quality consumer connection that you're going to get in audio and video, which is why we hung on to it so long. It's just a dumpster fire to use, which is why we're moving away from it. So that's I think we'll keep it at that. We've talked about that one a bit. Go ahead, next question.
Does anyone have experience with fast.io for content delivery? Any other options for someone just stepping into the world of CDNs?
I'd look pretty hard at Vimeo as far as like a clear listed label that you can that doesn't connect to anything. Ease of use and quality are pretty high. Bill, real quick.
Yeah, I use both Vimeo and Frame.io. Frame for security. If anything corporate doesn't need to get out of the house, that's, I think, the best solution. But I do most of my work on Vimeo Pro, particularly because it's great for embedding in somebody's website.
And I'm reading that as a CDN for live, which would lean me towards Vimeo as far as live stream / Vimeo. They're really doing really well in that market. Next question.
David Vessel says, how do I connect my Logitech 920 to the ATEM Mini?
You can't. It's a webcam. It's not an HDMI camera. You can't do that. So anyway, webcams, you need an HDMI camera, that HDMI output to go into your ATEM.
If you figure that out though, let us know. Because
yeah,
we'll be
if you
impressed.
do, come back and we'll put you on. We'll give you a whole hour if you can figure out how to get your Mac Mini. Yeah.
I would check.
Next,
through a Mac
Mini. Next question.
Do you trust vMix to encode streaming to Vimeo? What is a hardware alternative?
Link. So the elemental link, as a little box that you can put into it. I don't ever trust whatever's cutting to do the encoding, and I say that as someone who did that for a long time, but very much learned that it's so easy for you to overdrive your software. So, you want to have your encoder, whether it can be Wirecast as an encoder in another computer. It can be OBS getting an input and then sending it out. But I strongly recommend against having the same computer that's cutting your show, putting video out. Go ahead, Jeffrey, 15 seconds.
Yeah, with Wirecast, I actually use the other instance of Wirecast on another computer.
Your new audio isn't working again.
What?
Yeah, next question.
Software to use 920 on an iMac or on a Mac, like the webcam settings preference.
Plug it in.
Tool.
Manual camera and to control it, manual camera and webcam settings are the two that I've used. Yeah, but don't use them at the same time. It'll make your camera go gray, and you have to restart your computer until you get it over. There's something going on there. Yep, absolutely. Next question.
So Stuart kind of re-asked the question. I think
we'll save that
answered that one. No, I'm reading the one below it. Yes, I think we said the 930 is the same as the 920, different framing, and we have no idea about the 960. And then the last question, Vipin Abraham says, my question about Fast.io was about delivering files, not live stream. Sorry for the clarification.
Then you're still in Vimeo and Frame.io, are the two places, two ways that we would do it. And we use Frame.io heavily. And I keep on meaning to get Emery to come on. Emery's an old friend of mine, and so full disclosure, he was in the original. He was in MacBreak #1. And so 15 years ago, or whatever. So, but Frame.io is a great way to get review. All my reviews go up to Frame.io, so the client, I just upload it to Frame.io, and then the clients can sit there and give me frame by frame, circle things and tell me what they want to change, and then I have if you do it from, the key is, remember don't upload it to Frame.io. Don't output it and upload it. Export it from Final Cut or Premiere or whatever to Frame.io from the project, so that when they make the adjustments, it puts all the annotations back into your project. If you output it and then upload it, now you're hosed. So now you have to do it by hand, and it's really an unhappy experience. Bill and then Doug, 15 seconds.
So Frame just launched maybe a month ago a new transfer service that is a bit like BitTorrenting, but inside the walled garden, that really increases upload and download speeds for assets going up to Frame and back down. It's awesome.
Great. Doug?
I just wanted to clarify my question on the vMix encoding thing. I wasn't using vMix to cut the show. I was cutting with TriCaster to vMix, just using vMix to encode, but we had a problem at the beginning of our show yesterday. That's why I asked the question.
I mean, and I started off with a lot of software encoders. I will admit that I still mostly use Elementals, for what I do. And the link is the least expensive way to do that. As far as just putting stuff up, Zixi out, Zixi to AWS, and then from AWS, the routing. We are going to bring, with 2 weeks from now, we're going to bring the AWS team in to talk about that linkage with all of you, so that you guys can ask questions about it. Obviously, you can do something to restream, but as far as a hardware encoder that's doing a Zixi wrapper, it's going to put it in the cloud, and once it's there, it's being able to transport to as many outputs as you want. I think is a pretty compelling case for it, because it's, in my opinion, Zixi, when you don't know what your bandwidth is going to be like, Zixi is the best way out of a venue. So when you don't have a lot of control, and there's other Zixi solutions. That's just the easiest one. All right, we are going to shift gears to our, and this was going to be a general, all the new cameras that are coming out over the last week, and we were talking through it, but then we were able, Bob Caniglia, did I say your last name correctly? Oh, you're muted.
nobody ever says it's correctly. It's Caniglia, like La Familia, but that's why
Caniglia.
I always say it's just Bob from BlackMagic. It's easy.
I was worried about it all morning. I was like, I sat down with Bob earlier, and I was like, I was like, I didn't ask him how to say the last name, and now I don't know how it is, Caniglia. So we're Bob Caniglia, and you're coming in a little low, Bob. Right. Bob was Bob from BlackMagic, head of sales operations, was kind enough to join us, and so we decided we're going to go ahead. I mean, obviously, we were all focused on the camera update last week and really excited about it. There's a lot of BlackMagic users here, and so what your opportunity now is, there's a 12K camera out. We have the announcement. We've had some articles. We're all looking at those things, and if you're in the attendees here, your opportunity right now is to ask questions. This is our time. We've got someone who can really answer those questions and question some of our answers that are here. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up those questions. We're going to start off. Well, I'm going to let Chris kind of run with it. Chris Summers is our in-house camera expert, and he'll start off the questions. The first question I'll ask, though, and then we'll hand it off to Chris, is can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of that camera? Like, where did it come from? How long did it take development, et cetera?
Yeah, so, and hopefully my volume is a little better. I adjusted. So the concept of the camera started a few years back, obviously, but one of the things that makes it made the whole process work was the development of BlackMagic RAW. So the B-RAW codec is what really needed to be accelerated in development in order to accept such a large sensor. Because at the end of the day, if you have a 12K sensor, those files can be huge, but if you don't have a way to record and play them back without needing, some kind of supercomputer, it doesn't really work. So it's a combination of the camera body, obviously, which we had, that already existed, then the new sensor, the new color science, and the new update to BlackMagic RAW to be able to use these files. So it's kind of a combination. The sensor itself is our own design, and that started several years back because we were not getting the results we wanted from certain vendors, depending. We had a few hiccups over time with different manufacturers and the way they were doing certain things. So being able to have more control over it has given us more latitude in terms of what we wanted to do and what we wanted out of it. We have a couple of doctors on staff that are, our camera guys that have been around for a long time, some of which had to move in from other countries over the past 10, 15 years or so. So that's really where it started. But the whole thing, and one of the things that we talk about is that it's not just the camera, not just the sensor, it's kind of all of it in one, and that's how you get the results that hopefully everybody enjoys.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks so much. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. That camera looks amazing. I had a few questions about the sensor design, specifically around the color behind it. Obviously, there's been some information around with various groups. As I've heard, the scaling can happen on the sensor, which is great. I hope we can delve into that a little bit more, because you can scale on the sensor, as I've heard, without changing your field of view until you go down to Super 16 mode, which sounds amazing. But my question was related to, it's non-Bayer, but it's RGBW. So my understanding is that you have like a 6x6 array, and you got 6 red, 6 green, 6 blue, and then 18 white or clear pixels. I don't know what that pattern looks like. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, to be honest, we haven't really divulged all of that, all of those details per se. But the message that you probably already heard is that it's equal red, green, and blue, designed to, which is what allows us to be able to derive 8K and 4K without cropping the sensor. The crops, we've had to do certain crops over time. The only cropping starts to come in with the Super 16 area but that is sort of easier to derive.
And can you explain that? Explain why that allows you to scale in a way that you couldn't with Bayer?
Right. So what we're able to do is scale in the sensor rather than and even Grant admitted that, you know, if you took the 12K image and you decided to scale in software to a lower format, you might be able to get better results or different results. But the concept of doing the in-camera scaling without crop was the design from the start. And because the pixel density is such that we were able, you know, the 12K image has an amazing number of pixels, obviously. So by having equal distribution of the red, green, blue across and top and bottom, whatever, across the whole field of the sensor, then the targeting to do the 8 and 4K makes it easier to do. And as I say, it's a scaling through the sensor, but without having to narrow your field of vision.
So it's not doing a, now I understand a little bit better, I think, is that you're subsampling the sensor, and because that sensor has equal weight across that, so when you're not grabbing all, if you're doing 4K, it's 4K, but it's not grabbing all the pixels and then doing a scale down. It's not, yeah. So that, right. I understand.
That's probably the better way to, yeah, because there are so many pixels, then you only need to derive the ones that you need for that, but it's not, but you're doing it across the whole measurement of the sensor rather than trying to, you know, squeeze out in the middle.
Right. So that, because that'd be much more processor intensive to do the scaling from the full raster. The advantage of it, of course, which you were noting a little bit, is that transformation, the convolution kernel would actually make it a cleaner image. If you went from 12 down to 4, you're basically getting an oversampled image, which is where if you're pulling the scaling, if you're taking 4K out of that 12K, you're not taking advantage of mushing those pixels together. So it's a slight. Now, do you have any aliasing issues with that subsampling?
No, so that obviously that was a lot of the work that had to go into being able to do that through both design and implementation. And then of course the recording of it also comes into fact. So when Blackmagic Raw was announced, we said up front, you know, that it does partial debayering or demosaicing is was the term we were mostly using, but usually I had to use both because people didn't understand demosaic, they understood debayering. But the reason for using the term demosaic was it was the process that you do to a non-bayered sensor, you know, and here we are 18 months, 2 years later, having our non-Bayer sensor that we're trying to do the demosaic, and that's what accelerates the ability to play back the images, because that I find the most fun is to watch people say, oh, I played it back on my old MacBook and things like that. So so that was the setup really for this larger sensor, was the codec to be able to play back images relatively easily, because that's the whole idea, is that you would only shoot the one file. You wouldn't do a proxy to edit. You would use that file to edit and use it to color grade, and so you have the one file, and again streamlining the whole post process.
Jason, then Mickey, then Chris, and then we're going to go to the questions. So if you've got questions, keep on stacking them up in the Q&A, but we'll go Jason, Mickey, and then Chris, and go from there.
Yeah, again, I want to say thanks for giving us this chance, Bob. If I'm doing my math correctly, at that density and that sensor size, the camera has a pixel pitch of 2.2 microns. Like the Ari Alexa is what, like 8 1/4. How are you controlling for noise? Like, is this a codec thing, or is it just magic physics?
Well, there's always Blackmagic, but no, it's a combination of everything. So there's the color science that helps us do it, the codec, but you know, when you design a codec and a sensor at the same time, you're given the ability to control more factors. And I think that's what really is the benefit. And of course, then further to that, the DaVinci Resolve software doing the color grading also plays all into it, and knowing all of the parts, because it's not often that people have full control over the camera, the sensor, the color science, and the nonlinear editing system. So, you know, when you have that combination, so again, I think a lot of it, the adjustments had to be made along the line, but it was all lined up. This was all lined up from the start of the Blackmagic Raw codec development to bring this all together and make it happen. and yeah, obviously aliasing, all those things needed to be worked out with the design. That's math I don't understand, but somebody has to do it.
Mickey, go ahead.
Hey Bob, thank you for joining us. Thanks for your time. I just want to ask, not camera related, if you could bump up your level a little bit, maybe 3-4 dB.
Oh,
it's
still
just
low,
coming
low?
in a bit low. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks again, Bob. I just had a question about coming back to color and 12K, or then sampling on the sensor down to 8 or 6 or 4K. Could you speak to the differences in color depth? If I was going to go into a green screen environment where that was vitally important, what happens on the sensor when you're scaling on the sensor to the color?
Well, the color's consistent across, so that you're not going to see anything change there, and even the dynamic range is the same across them too. So, having not played with it yet, I can't really tell exactly, but that the consistency is already built in, and even such that with the new Gen 5 color science in Resolve, if you shoot with the 12K camera and you shoot, no matter what the resolution, but if you also shoot with one of the other Blackmagic cameras, you can adjust the color science even on something that's already been shot. So and move to Gen 5 in Resolve, so you can actually do that in the color grading process. But the idea of the 12K, as you say, for VFX plates and things like that, that was part of the reason why we wanted to do that. And since the launch of the camera, we've been, a lot of guys that shoot national parks and that kind of thing, they also have reached out. I would think if you shot, lions with 12K, you wouldn't have to be as close, which would be good.
Absolutely. Chris Fenwick, and then we're going to go to the questions online.
I'm going to ask the real question, Bob. What camera are you using, and where are you doing your key? What are you using to do your key?
Oh, right now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I have a Pocket 4K, and I also have, and I'm using a green screen. So I took a picture of my family room upstairs. My wife would not let me hunker down all these months, so I'm down in the basement, but I brought lights, green screen, and Pocket 4K, and then ATEM Mini Pro right there.
There you go.
And so that's been my setup for the last few months, and somehow I don't think I'm ever going to leave. This made me my permanent location.
A lot of us feel the same way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Rick Markley, and again, for everyone here, if you're an attendee, your responsibility is to either ask questions or vote on questions. There's no lollygagging here. So get up there and let us know if you think that some of these questions are good. Go ahead and vote them up. If you think you have your own, go ahead and do that. So Rick Markley said, and this was a little bit of a future, and I'm not sure if it's applicable, but Rick Markley said, Bob, can you chat about Blackmagic's design roadmap for future integration with Unreal Engine? So anything with Unreal Engine, are you guys?
I don't know anything specific. I believe that Unreal Engine uses some of our I/O devices and things like that. I know they do. So we've worked, on an OEM basis with several of those types, and in some of the new production, the virtual, or not virtual, what do they call that? The way that guys are working now with Unreal Engine playing back and doing,
Mandalorian style.
Yeah, that there's a lot of those, more going on with those now, and we're definitely partnering with either manufacturers or just the workflow in itself, because sometimes it's maybe a DeckLink card that's working in some of the computers, or it's also Resolve and some of the other hardware on set. So there's a lot of that and a lot of different unique relationships we have with some of those guys.
It certainly is. I will say, as someone who's trying to buy about 10 8K cards right now, finding them is like from store to store. You're just wandering around. Oh, I can get 2 here, I can get 3 here. It's a constant problem. Troy Warrior asks, any change in light sensitivity at different resolutions?
So they're consistent in terms of, and so the ISO and the dynamic range is across the board on the 12K, 8K, and 4K that are full sensor. So that, and the ISO
what's the-
range
Yeah, go
goes
ahead. What-
150 to 3200.
And what are the
800
base?
native.
800's the base. Is it?
Yes, 800's the base ISO across the range.
Right. And would you say that the light sensitivity or the clean the concern that some of us had was the adding that much resolution to a super 35 sensor instead of going to full frame, again, creates smaller photo sites. And would you say that the camera is as sensitive or as clean as the current URSAs that are doing 4K at super 35?
Yeah, that seems to be the results that guys have already tested through. I think that's the one thing that getting some of the first units out to some of the DPs to verify that, because taking our word for it doesn't always result. So that's why we have got guys that are testing, and some of them are going into their hands this week. It's actually a unique time for us, because normally when you try to reach out to some of these guys who are always busy, they're busy, so they can't, but some of them are restricted from working at their full capacity right now. So this is actually a good time for us to, it was one thing introducing the ATEM Mini Pro during a pandemic, but then to introduce a camera that we can actually get into the hands of some people that we'd like to see what they say, this is also good timing for us, I suppose.
Yep, absolutely. Stuart Fairweather says, I believe that the 12K is rolling shutter. What is the readout time?
Yeah, I actually think I have some of those somewhere.
And is it true the readout time is faster on the 4K than it is from the 12K?
I believe that it is, but it's not massive.
Right.
Yeah, those I didn't dedicate to memory by any means. Let me see if I can find that. I had something on that, because I believe that it will eventually be either on the site or in the manual. I know there's a chart that'll be in the manual to show the dynamic range difference. Wow, I don't know why. I swore I had that, but it's slightly different, but it's not massive. But if I find it, I'll let you know again.
Yep, absolutely. Troy Warrior says, and I think we kind of touched on this. It was an earlier question. Oh, go ahead.
I did find it. So, so the 12K has the rolling shutter, and the readout time is around 15.5 milliseconds in 12K, 12.3 in 12K, 2.4, 8.5 in 8K, and 4K using the full field of view 7. Oh no, I see. 8K and 4K are both the same at 8.5 milliseconds, and then it'll go down to 4.25 in 4K Super 16. So it does vary a little bit depending on
how you set it up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Troy Warrior asks, what is the debearing pattern of the new sensor? And
so I don't think we really talked about that. And I don't know that we have a name. That was something somebody said the other day. We should have come up with a name for the sensor, which we did not. And we certainly didn't come up with too much of a unique name for the actual product, calling it Ursa Mini Pro 12K. But yeah, so I don't know that we have a name for that.
Dick Lieber asks, so this is a little off the subject, so just answer as needed. Is when are the ATEM Mini Pros back available again? Are they back? They're back ordered everywhere. Is just how's that? Give us a little insight as much as you can about what's going on with those.
So it's funny because I look at that all the time, and
probably every day.
No, I do, but no matter how many we get, we wind up getting orders for more than are coming, and so it has become a barrel that just never seems to fill up. And there was you know, the factory started shipping. They shipped a lot of ATEM minis, the originals, yesterday or last week. This week they're starting to ship more of the pros again, but it has been, you know, yesterday, like today, when I looked today, I said, oh great, a whole bunch more of the pros came. But then when I looked at how many we needed more than they are sending again. And I said, well, how is this possible? How come every day the numbers go up? So, yeah. And
well, I think I can probably illustrate a little bit just in the panel how many people have ATEM minis or mini pros. Yeah, so that's the. I mean, it's become kind of the, you know, almost standard operating for a lot of people who are doing this. It's a good product.
I'll tell you, it's not as easy even if you work here. So when the ATEM Mini Pro was launched, they sent one to me, but I had to send my ATEM Mini to one of our other guys because we just didn't have enough of things to go around. So I lost that one too. But I also know that we've been working on increasing capacity in our factories because they're all our own factories. But so we're trying to do that. But we've also had, I mean, there's a lot of challenges that all manufacturers are having, whether it's parts, whether it's shipping. You know, the flights aren't as regular as they used to be. So getting product made, getting it here has been a challenge. And of course, then there's COVID closings and things like that. But trying our best. We thank everyone for their patience, and we're
it's rough. It's rough being that popular. So, yeah. Tom Weiland said, "Will this 12K footage be able to edit in Final Cut 10 as well, not just DaVinci?"
Well, so there'll be updates to the plugins that we provide. So we provide one for Premiere and for Media Composer, and I don't know about if Final Cut has it or not, but some manufacturers have implemented their own, and so the SDK will be updated so that they can continue to do that. But it's always been an open format. You know, there's no licensing fees or anything for the codec, so that'll continue, and you know, things will get updated as people adjust to the updates.
Eric Rosen said, why was the priority to resolution and not dynamic range on the new camera?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. And, you know, no matter what you do, you have to figure out what area you're trying to cover and why. Now, part of the dynamic range and even ISO control, the camera is not designed to be something that you're going to, you know, run and gun as much as it would be for true cinematic sort of work. So, you know, even we know that when someone has a dark scene in a film, it's still being lit, as opposed to if you're out, you know, shooting news or shooting documentary where you don't get to light your scenes all the time. So you know, that's part of where it is. And, you know, and I think our ability to make something that addressed multiple markets in one camera was part of it too, to be able to get people to, you know, the ability to go 12K, but also to have the 8K and the 4K all from the same image. You know, I think now myself, I wondered, you know, I would like to be able to mount one of the 12Ks over a sports stadium and shoot it, and then go in and you can zoom in later on the images, and of course the ability to just shoot with one camera and do tight shots, wide shots, and medium shots, especially if you're using the 12K to derive 4K. So, yeah.
Is there any dual ISO? As Troy Warrior wanted to know if there's any dual ISO on the 12K.
No, this sensor doesn't have the dual ISO. The other sense of the pocket cameras, it's strictly I guess it's going to be 150 to 3200.
Sam Emilio asks, what led to the decision to include CFast slots instead of CF Express?
So that was those were their probably legacy. The real focus, I think, for the real speed is going to be using the NVMe drives. So the SSDs, and that's why the new SSD dock was put in, and that's why we also added that the USB-C port in the back of the camera, so it's not inside the door. Well, the one inside the door is still there, but then the one in the back was added because that's where the faster media is, and for the larger, faster media, which is mostly what you're going to need, especially if you're shooting an hour at 12K.
Guillaume de la Fontaine, sorry about that, Guillaume. For low light efficiency, Sony goes for less photo sites and bigger ones. How do you deal with it? So can you tell us a little bit about how you're making up for the fact that this photo sites are, I know we've kind of hit this a couple times, but I think it's probably our biggest concern, is how you're dealing with the smaller photo sites. Is there in the calculation?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how they're doing the math there, but I know that the thresholds were I mean, you know, the targets for what they wanted to derive in the ISO range that we're giving, you know, and it's one of those things where I know that the guys know that there's benchmarks that we have across our own cameras, let alone anybody else's, and mostly focusing on our own. But so they needed to make sure that the sensor did what it was supposed to do across the range to provide, you know, this similar performance. Now, what I think, from what I'm told, the guys that have been shooting with it really haven't noticed much of a difference. The difference in dynamic range is actually slightly different than the way it's calculated for the others, in the sense that depending on where you are in the range, most of the time you have a little bit more above the ISO range, as opposed to, like, sometimes the old ones, the 4.6K would have, like, say 6 above and 9 below, right? Well, this one has more like 6.5 above and then a little less below to get the 14, and that's so it's a different calculation through that to be able to get it.
Go ahead, Chris.
Just a question about the latitude there. What you were saying now, Bob, does that change if you're going from 800 to 1600 or go down to 400? Does it shift down in that latitude?
Yeah, so there's
up or above.
Yep. So there'll be a chart in the manual, which I don't have now, but I know that there is a chart that shows us where the shift in latitude is, depending on. So it does change as you go up and down, and it shows you the difference above and below. But there's also another chart to show you where the 4.6K is, to show its above and below numbers, so you can understand that there's actually a difference. And so cool. Even though the numbers might be slightly smaller in terms of, you know, 14 versus 15, in some cases you actually have more above than, you know, so I think it
exactly
may do what people, you may be getting more than you think. You know, there's perceived dynamic range of those two.
Yeah, it might look better at 1600 than it would at 800, even if it's not rated as such.
And yeah, and that's why the sweet spots for certain things, like even when we have the dual native, sometimes it's better to shoot at the bottom of the top range than the top of the bottom range, and vice versa. So it's you know, scene dependent, things like that. So I think we'll see similar responses to those, and the chart will help.
Yeah. Kyle Hammond says, I asked this question last week, the BMCC 4K versus 6K. I know what Alex says, but I want to hear it from Bob at BlackMagic. For example, why are you using a 4K right now instead of a 6K?
Oh, the only reason I'm using it is because it was the first one I had down here before we had control over it. This particular, the 4K actually has an Olympus zoom lens, so I can actually zoom from here. Not that I do, but I could. And also the 6K I use upstairs when we do the family Zoom calls.
That's great. Nothing like having a 6K for the families for family Zoom.
Priorities are.
Well, and Kevin, this just related to. Can you tell us exactly what the lens is? Kevin Murphy's asking that. What lens are you using?
Oh, so I have a teleprompter over it, so I can't really tell. But it's the Olympus. I think it's the 12 to 42. So Olympus makes there's only like 4 lenses that have the zoom control. There's a couple of Lumix and a couple of Olympus lenses. Yep. It's like a pancake looking lens.
And it's funny, the depth of field is really long, but it doesn't matter because you're keying it and you can just blur out the background a little bit and call it a day. Exactly. That works well. Bill and then George.
Since I worked a lot of my career in Arizona, heat has always been an issue for me. And if I remember correctly, the original BlackMagic camera was actually water cooled or some sort of fluid cooled. Now that you've got this big sensor, is there any issues with heat management that you can talk about?
Right. So there's the Ursa Mini Pro design always had that in there. And so the water cooling or whatever we called it, liquid something. So that is the same for this. Now, fortunately, over time, because we have this full control over all of that, we've been able to adjust as needed. Now, I'm not so sure how much more heat or less heat this new sensor design actually produces. I know power-wise, if you're shooting 12K, it does take a little bit more power than, so you get about, I think it was 8 watts more than a G2. So if you're shooting at 12K, you need a little bit more wattage. But in terms of the heat, I don't think, and then none of the guys so far that have been using it have reported anything out of the ordinary on that.
George?
Hey, Bob, thanks for coming on. When this camera got released, I constantly get peppered with this question from my Canon friends. Why is there no focus tracking in BlackMagic cameras? I understand somewhat why, but was there any consideration? This camera is so high end. Was there any consideration in focus tracking?
Well, that's something that we don't have now, obviously. We did there are some improvements to the autofocus response in the newer camera. So although the camera does ship with a PL mount and not a lot of autofocusing PL lenses, but you can put in an EF mount. But at this point, we haven't done any of that yet. And in this camera itself, it's not really the autofocus market, but autofocus in general is something. Yeah, we take a look at that, and we'll at this point we haven't implemented something like that. I think there's some probably some issues with licensing or whatever else. I'm not sure, but that's just me guessing.
Chris Summers?
I would just agree that autofocus tracking for me currently is a consumer or prosumer feature and not a pro feature at all, because you'd be hiring an assistant.
Like Chris. Victor asks, Bob, this is a little again off the camera subject. Can you say anything regarding the ATEM Minis and Pros audio preamps, and is it limited since it doesn't have mini XLR, for example?
Well, I don't know.
It's probably this group's. It's probably the audio input is probably this group's biggest complaint about the ATEM Mini and Mini Pro is the little 1/8" jacks.
Well, right. So yeah, the 1/8. Well, again, the target audience originally on the ATEM Mini was for people that didn't know what a switcher was, so they may not have known that either. And it was all about size. Now, what I do in this implementation is I put my mic, I plug it into the camera itself, so it embeds and use it there. Now, the one thing that we did do recently was originally it was only mic. It is mic and line, and we also added delay to the two inputs, but the rest of it I don't know what the preamp. A lot of times I've said this about the original ATEMs, that if you're going to do outboard audio, then you should just have an interface to come into it. Do your delay ahead of time. Of course, now we put delay in here, but so
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah.
Chad Lafarge says, is the ATEM Mini or Mini Pro intended to run 24/7 or as needed? Would heat be an issue if it was run constantly?
No, I mean, mine runs often, almost all day. I noticed that the 4K does expel more heat. I mean, the Pro expels more heat than the Mini, which I get because it's got the encoder built in. But over time, we've, in the last, I don't know how many years, I guess since the Teranex Mini design came out, we've had to hire a bunch of thermal guys who are there to try and work with the heat issues of certain products. Because a lot of times people will complain about like the old ATEM chassis, and they'll say, they warm up. And I say, well, where are they? Well, they're outside. I'm like, well, geez, I don't remember dragging all of our gear outside back in the day. I mean, it used to be in a cold room somewhere. But yeah, so over time we've had to do more thermal work for that. And I did notice that the Pro puts out more heat, but I leave mine on. Sometimes I leave mine on 24 hours because I forget to hit the switch on the way out.
Yeah, I think mine's been on for, currently mine has been on for 2 or 3 weeks straight, and I haven't had any issues. So because it's being used as a web presenter because we can't buy any web presenters. Not that we're bitter.
That's another one. Although the web presenter costs more. Well, not costs more than this one, but it costs more than the Mini.
The big advantage of the web presenter for us is that A, it's rack mountable. B, we can do 4K in, so we can just have everything running in 4K and just drop it through, and it just does what it does, and it shows up. It actually shows up a little bit more consistently, for some of the older machines. Brent Schnarr said, if the camera can downsample to 8K in the sensor, why only output 4K?
Well,
so
there are no 8K SDI. You would need 4 SDI outs to get 8K out. So that would be.
Well, the other problem is there's no 8K switch. Oh wait, there is an 8K switcher and an 8K hyperdeck. So there is a question that we have here, like why do we what?
Cinema camera, not a studio camera. So yeah, look, when we came out with the ATEM Constellation, which does take 8K sources, I went to my friends at Canary and said, 48G connector, where are you? So yeah, so that now the one thing about the output that you do need is to be able to check focus. And so what we did change to this camera is the SDI out will be assignable to be able to, so on the Pocket 4K and 6K, you're able to kind of finger swipe zoom in and move around. That assignable output from the LCD pop out will be assigned to an SDI out, so that if you put it to a big monitor, because checking focus on a 12K image, you're going to need more than the viewfinder or even the little screen. You can put it to that. So that is one thing that we did do. But yeah, it would have required a whole nother rework of the whole body to be able to put enough outputs to get 8K out.
Right. A. Mitchells asks, will there be a sorting out of the issues with the ATEM Mini and Pro shipping with variety of power supplies with varying power specs? It's understandable that because the supply issues, not all will have the same locking connector, but can the changes in amps or volts delivered cause any functional issues?
So as long as the locking connector power supplies was an issue for a while because we weren't able to get them, and we didn't want to not ship the product, so we used the other ones. They're all listed what their power requirements are on the website, and almost all of the every one that we have that has an external power supply has a wide range that you can use, and that's why people use a variety of them. The only thing is that you don't want to use something underpowered for what you're trying to power. The original ATEM Mini takes less power than the Pro because the Pro has the extra hardware inside. So that's the only thing, is just kind of get in within the window of what they are, and that is listed in the tech specs section in the support area of the website.
Stuart Fairweather says, with the arrangement of pixels on the sensor, is it possible to group a matrix of pixels as a larger virtual pixel for further low light performance at lower resolutions?
It's not an option on the camera.
I think that's where you get, if you capture all 12K and then you take it into somewhere and scale it down, that's essentially what you're going to get, right?
Well, that would be, that you would get a different result by doing it in software, rather than doing it in hardware. So in sensor, so you could get a different result that way.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, just going back to the topic on the power supplies, the ATEM Mini, I'm not sure about the Pro, but the ATEM Mini could take quite a decent range of voltage. It's not strictly just 12 volts, and I've successfully powered it from V-mount batteries and from power supplies, power systems in my sound bag. So that's pretty handy.
That's great. Stuart Fairweather said, any chance the BRAW support coming to other camera vendors? Is it something that someone else could adopt if they wanted to?
So we already have support there's a Panasonic camera, a Canon camera in that you can record on the new BlackMagic Video Assist 12Gs, and a Sigma camera is also being added shortly, so that you take the output of those cameras into the Video Assist 12Gs and you can record BlackMagic RAW there. So BlackMagic RAW has been offered to all vendors. The concern probably from some of them is that they kind of need our help to implement it. And that's why Canon and Panasonic decided, well, let's try it with this one camera and see how it goes or whatever. And so that's actually worked. And Sigma now is working with us to do it there. As I said earlier, you don't have to license the codec, so it's free, and that is open to any camera manufacturer as well as anybody that wants to support it downstream, not just for recording, for editing and color grading and whatnot.
And when you keep on saying that it's free, we're underlining the fact that the Red Raw is not free or not available, right?
Well, I just know that I don't know
good.
which ones charge for what, but I know that other codecs, there are licensing fees, and there are no licensing fees with BlackMagic RAW.
Yeah, that's great. Chris?
Just to extrapolate from that, besides camera manufacturers, are you maybe taking B-RAW into like Atomos recorders or Odyssey recorders or anything like that?
We're not currently, but I don't know if any of them are even interested. The difference is, see, even on our recorders, it wouldn't record BlackMagic RAW from a BlackMagic camera because they do them internally. So it would have to be specific to the camera. So it's a combo at that point that you're doing. But
Doug Johnson said, was the ability to output 8K over SDIs considered in development of the Ursa? Was it considered for the 12K, or was it just not part of the spec?
It wasn't going to be considered in that body because that body wouldn't have the SDI outputs to do it. So that is something that would probably need to be done in a different way.
like a camera back. Like a camera back. So Lee Love said, is BMD still committed to the M43 format and mount?
Well, so the Micro Four Thirds is only on I guess some of the studio cameras, the Micro Studio camera,
and the 4K,
and the Pocket 4K. Yeah, and frankly, when we made the Pocket 4K as opposed to the original, the skinny jeans pocket camera and the cargo pants pocket camera, as I like to think of it. Part of the reason for making the 4K or for making the Micro Four Thirds mount on the new one, the 4K, the same was because people had investments in either the lenses or the adapters or whatever, and so that carried over. But fortunately, with the Pocket 4K, we were able to put the EF mount on there and then a larger sensor because why not? But that so we kind of have support for both, and I think over time, I haven't done the analysis, but I believe that we've sold almost as many 4/3 mount cameras as we have EF cameras, and so everybody has comes from a different perspective and
from your perspective, you just given the shakeup with Olympus and everything else, you don't see Micro Four Thirds going anywhere at least from your perspective.
I don't think so. I don't think that they're, again, the legacy support of all those lenses would be there. So right. I guess we'll see, and it's also easy to adapt to it, which helps.
Right. Yep. Kenneth Rose says, maybe Bob can tell us what ATEM really means.
That's funny. I don't know because we bought the ATEM, or we bought the assets from Ecolab, and they had a product called the ATEM, and I remember asking one of the guys who used to work there, I said, what does it stand for? He goes, I never really got a straight answer on that. And I said, well, no, you're never going to get a straight answer from us because we didn't name it in the first place. But we used that name from the start, and of course, even depends on the accent that you have, whether you call it the ATEM or the ATEM. I call it the ATEM, but but the
we have to call it the ATEM on our side because there's an encoder called an ATEM, which gets really confusing if we go down that path.
Right. So yeah, so we keep it with that, but I never got a good answer on where that name came from. It's just that we used it because it was a name that existed, sort of like Teranex and DaVinci. I came from DaVinci, and all the others, Fairlight.
Yeah.
And,
I think the only story I heard was it was an Egyptian god.
Wow.
Yeah, that's ATUM. I think it's ATUM. But
I figured it had something to do with automatic television.
I thought so too, but
memory or something like that.
It's probably
like
not. If you dig too deep into that god, it's probably not something that. Anyway, so we'll just leave it at that. Chris Van Wyck.
Bob, coming from DaVinci, what are your thoughts on just in general, the camera and switcher line? What are your thoughts on the color controls that the switchers have over the cameras?
So it's funny because a few years ago, we brought in some of our Ursa Minis at the time. I don't think we had the Pro yet. To a company that was very familiar with DaVinci color correction, but they wanted to start doing a live show. So we brought in an ATEM, we brought in some of the cameras. And so we started to show them the color correction capability in the software. And this is before the hard panel came out, but the software. So one of the guys said, he goes, well, who knows how to use that? I said, the guy down the hall that runs your Resolve suite. So they started bringing him in to shade the cameras and save settings and whatnot. And when that guy came in, he's like, I'm a post guy. I'm not a live guy. I said, it's the same thing. Look. And he's like, oh, all right, I get it. Because we copied a lot of the tools from Resolve. So so at the end of the day, because I said that all the time, I said, well, get the Resolve guy to come in here and set up the cameras. And so that's kind of worked. So that's where the idea was we're going to take Resolve color tools and put it into here. And then of course later we came up with the control panels, which look more standardized to guys that are doing it in the field, but the ability to kind of branch out. I mean, the funny thing is when I worked at DaVinci prior to BlackMagic buying them, at the time the systems were $500,000, so I didn't have one at home like I kind of do now. So when they bought it, they said, oh, so you know how to run it? I said, know how to run it? I didn't ever see it. I said, I don't have one of these at home. It doesn't work that way. And so today it's kind of laughable that, I mean, of course we have it, and my daughter when she was in high school years ago, she had she played with Resolve, I only gave her the free version, but whatever. But that's the part that I find the most interesting, because I said the other day that I think at the time that they bought it in 2009, there might have been 200 people in the world that knew how to run a Resolve. And that's probably a high number, and today it's millions. And so that's kind of strange. But I think that also helps with the interface for people because, as I said, if you know anyone that knows how to do color grading in Resolve, they can do the color grading.
And the funny thing is, for me, was that I came from Sony cameras, a lot of Sony cameras, f950s and everything else. Mm-hmm. And I'm used to R-G and G-R and, and I'm used to exactly how they interact in a vector scope with my, Demon chart. And I have all the, I'm just used to exactly. And so when BlackMagic came out with this crazy interface, I was like, this is nuts. No one's ever going to, no one's ever going to go to this. You need your R-G. And within a year I was done. I went back to I had to do a shoot with the 950 for something. And I was just like, oh, this is really hard. It kind of went away because it's so much more fluid. And I was able to be more creative as far as how the camera looks than just making it accurate.
Sure. Well, I was a TD, so when they bought that was the funny conversation I had with one of the guys here. He said, oh, do you know anything about switchers? And I said, well, yeah. I said, I've sold switchers to a bunch of companies, and I'm an old TD. And they said, well, what's a TD? I said, well, you're going to need me more than you think. But when I first saw the software interface, I was like, well, who's going to use software? I need a hard panel. But then after a while, I got so used to the software that I go to the hard panel and go, where is that? Forget it. I'll use the software. So, as you say, over time, you get used to doing both. And that, it is funny to me, though, to think where it's gone in the last 11 years. Because I was the youngest guy at DaVinci and became the oldest guy at BlackMagic like that.
That's funny. Chris, real quick, and then we're going to go to the questions because we're stacking up.
It's fine. I yield my time.
Andrew asks, would it be possible with firmware to update, to remap some of the buttons on the ATEM Mini to other uses that are less useful, like forward duration buttons to, say, media pool switching?
No, yeah, I know what he means, and that it is not something that has been, I don't know that how, I mean, I understand sort of how we could do it, but I don't think that that's on the roadmap to be able to do it. But, you know, what I wind up doing, full disclosure, is I use a Stream Deck.
We have a lot of those too.
You know, and that makes it easy because, because like especially if I have to be the TD and be the talent and all of that, it makes it a little bit easier for me to hit those buttons because I'll just sequence what I need to do. So that is another one. But I do understand that. But the thing about it is, if you think of the target audience of the products at those price points, it's for people that we're just trying to get them going that don't even know really what a switcher is. Like the original one didn't have a multi-view in it. And as I started to say, but if you know what a multi-view is, I don't know that that's the switcher that you need.
Right.
You know, you might need something more sophisticated. Now, the one thing I will say is that they were, you know, when I worked at other manufacturers or I dealt with other products over the years, especially in switcher land, I always found that not every switcher worked the same as the other ones as they went up and down in size. I mean, they could be completely different from the same manufacturer. And you go, well, how is this possible? Because they had different teams. But if you look at the software that we use for the ATEM Mini, all the way up to the Constellation, it's the same software. You have more buttons and options. And that's beauty to help people go up and down.
Well, and I would say that it's lethal, you know, because you get your $300 switcher, and what are you going to do? Because it takes almost nothing to learn how to do the next one and the next one and the next one. Before you know it, you're on a Constellation, and the transfer of time. You know, you can have students working on something with a Mini, and then they can be using a Constellation, and it's just knowing what the new things are, but not. There's no remapping of understanding of how it works, you know, which I think is really powerful. Now I'm going to tell everyone online, we are running out of time. We're going to end at 9. I promised Bob it was in and out, 1 hour. You got to vote on the questions because otherwise we're not going to get to the bottom of the list. All right. So A Mitchells says, will the actual Teranex processing chips finally be making their way to the Teranex product line, or are they considered too old to be retrievable technology to integrate with the newer video capabilities and standards?
I don't think that the chips necessarily are what's there. It's more of the software.
Right.
There, you know, it's one of these things where there's a lot of product lines. We have a lot of product lines now, and getting attention in each area takes time. And so, as I say a lot of times, just watch this space. We'll wait for that plane to land. We'll see what happens.
Kevin Murphy said Zcam has some exciting Ethernet control. Any chance of BlackMagic supporting this in the ATEM line eventually? Being able to control the Zcam. I don't.
Yeah, it's through Ethernet. That might be an SDK thing, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Kevin Murphy says, when are we getting a new web presenter?
Well, it's called the ATEM Mini, in a way. Right. But yeah, I don't know. That is that's another one that we could do something with. But again, you know, everything gets in the way, like new ATEM panels or a 12K camera or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Andrew said, would it be possible to output 720p video with the ATEM Mini Pro with a firmware update? I mean, could you get to a 720p?
Possibly, although I don't know that that would be one of the first things they want to do. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Troy Warrior said, remap, is it possible, would there ever be a chance to remap the HDMI on ATEM Mini to 2 outs?
Yeah, I don't know that hardware-wise that could be possible on the current models.
A. Mitchell's also asked, will there be a delay compensation added to the embedded HDMI audio inputs for future firmware updates?
I'm not sure that there would be. In theory, that the camera does compensate for that on the output, but perhaps, but I'm not sure.
I think part of the issue is a lot of us are using because we don't like the inputs into the ATEM Mini, we're using the cameras as a way to get the full mix, you know, into the into the ATEM. So because we've got better connectors on the cameras than we have on the switcher, and so I think that that's the workaround that people are trying to kind of figure out.
Right.
The Lee Love asks, will BlackMagic ever support NDI?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a licensing thing. That's a whatever. But I guess we'll wait and see.
Lee Love said, would BlackMagic consider support of the Leica Sigma Panasonic L mount?
There's been talk of different mounts, but I don't think we've made any progress yet.
Bill Lorenz says, can time code from an ATEM, can I get time code from the ATEM to sync the camera recorders?
Well, it depends on the combination, but even in the ATEM Mini Pro, the time code from the switcher will go to the camera.
Okay, there you go. And of course, another future question, Kevin Murphy asking, any refresh on the studio line coming? Yep.
Yeah.
And then the final question that we actually were able to cut through those questions at record time or in the speed round. We have go ahead, Chris, before we go to the final question. Yep.
Oh, thanks. Just a question about what's the roadmap for delivery on these cameras, given the situation that the whole world is in, with the people ordering, and secondly, how does one get a hand on one of these cameras in Europe to do testing?
The 12K cameras you're talking about?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is, I guess, our intention to start to manufacture for orders, for lack of a better term, in the next couple of weeks. So I would say that sometime next month we'll probably start seeing the first ones come out of the factory. I think we're pretty well prepared to be able to produce. I don't know how. I guess we don't know how the volume really is going to be. Do we need to make 10 or do we need to make 100? Or what's the number? But we are going to start manufacturing them in a few weeks, assuming we don't run into anything that we didn't expect, I guess, during this first go around. There are some cameras going out to people in various regions, not just the US, but also in Europe and whatever for testing. But I guess eventually, we'll see about whether we get some, through press or whatever. But at this point, we haven't come up with that plan yet. We're still at step one.
I actually don't know what to do with the last question, so I'm just going to ask it. Is it, does anyone know the name of mythical creature that eats dragons? Would this be the right name for a sensor? I don't know what that is. Stuart went off on the things. We asked it just so we could go ahead.
I think he's considering it to be a red killer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There we
come
go.
on,
Now
Alex.
I wasn't smart enough for that one. So there we go. We have to find the mythical creature for dragons. All right, Bob. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming and hanging out and surviving the pit.
It was welcome anytime.
It was really a pleasure to have you. Hopefully, we'll be able to persuade you to come on again on some of the next releases. I hope you enjoyed the hour.
This is great. Yep, sure.
Yep, absolutely. All right, thanks, Bob. Thanks everybody else. We can't do this without you. The attendees asking good questions, the panelists asking good questions and answering questions. We really appreciate everyone and the contribution you make to this every morning. So remember that we're. I forgot to tell Mickey to hit it. Go ahead, hit it. Remember that tomorrow we've got Rene Ritchie. So Rene Ritchie's going to be here, and he's going to be answering your questions about how he did what he did and how he keeps on moving forward. Friday and Saturday are both education second hours. Saturday's the long day. We've got Unreal, we've got Final Cut, and we've got vMix coming up. And then tomorrow, remember also, if you want to, Memo Live is almost ending on the demo. So if you have any last questions, come on Thursday. And then Sunday is 2 hours of Q&A. We'll see you tomorrow. All right. Thanks, guys.